On today's show, we are going to look at potential offseason cuts, guys who could be traded maybe or outright dumped. And then we're also going to look at PUP candidates, aka guys coming off serious injuries in 2024. The idea here is just to begin to shape our takes and ranks for 2025 best ball, which I know people are doing drafts already now. For Dynasty, I know these freaks are always making moves in Dynasty, and really just to start to get our heads around making the best rankings dynamically to the time of year, because fantasy football, quite frankly, is now a 24/7, 365 rankings bonanza. Let's get into it here with potential cuts. I think the one that maybe is the headliner for this year is what's going on in Jacksonville. Both Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are considered cut candidates. Remember, Christian Kirk sustained that broken collarbone halfway through last season, but he was really underperforming anyways, even before he broke his collarbone. Christian Kirk will also turn 29 years old in November. Jaguars can save $10 million or so by cutting him. Evan Ingram, somewhat similarly, underwent season-ending surgery in December for a torn labrum. He'll be 31 in September. You also get everything going on with the new regime, Liam Cohen in for overhauling of what's going on in Jacksonville. Jack, what's your take on everything going on with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram here?
Yeah, from everything I've seen, it seems likely that at least one of them will get cut. I've seen Kirk mentioned more as the cut candidate, but it seems like both could be on the chopping block. Brian Thomas is obviously the wide receiver one of the future for the Jaguars, and Parker Washington played fairly well when he was called upon to fulfill a bigger role. But the bigger thing is that the Jags do have a new regime. They've got Liam Cohen at head coach. They've got a new GM too. Neither of those guys have any ties to either Kirk nor Ingram. And the Jaguars could look to target wide receiver in the draft. So when you put all of that together, Kirk and Ingram seem like someone that could be on their way out of Jacksonville with the cap savings.
I mean, my take, Daigle, was that these guys kind of operate similarly, right? Do you really need Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram? They both win in short area. Evan Ingram has been a liability as a blocker. His yards per target stuff has been bad. I don't know about cutting both of them. I could see it happening, but yeah, what do you think about one or both, or the fallout really? Because they're going to have Brian Thomas is going to be a borderline first round pick in almost every format this year.
And he should be, because we saw in the 4 games to close the year last season with Mac Jones too, that in those 4 games without both Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, Brian Thomas Jr. saw double-digit targets in every contest and finished as the overall wide receiver one in that span, ahead of both Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Right now in some drafts, you can get Brian Thomas Jr. in a double tap at the turn, and he genuinely has overall wide receiver one in his range of outcomes. So it seems like a pretty good value based on these potential cuts.
Yeah, we have Brian Thomas, Evan, 11th overall in our initial best ball rankings. We do not have a single Jaguar before 106 after him. So it's like Brian Thomas, we have as a really good pick right now, 11 overall. No one else on the entire team. They're going to be thin at wide receiver, at pass catcher if both these guys go. Jack mentioned Parker Washington. I don't know that he's an actual NFL player. They still have Gabe Davis on the roster. But yeah, Evan, any thoughts on the state of the Jaguars heading into this offseason?
Well, I'd love to hear Coach speak like this at the Combine. Liam Cohen just came out and said it. Our passing game is going to funnel through Brian Thomas. So he's going to be a really high floor, high ceiling pick in 2025. Absolutely first round caliber. The guy who I think is interesting is Brenton Strange, especially if Evan Ingram gets cut, which seems like a distinct possibility. Brenton Strange, in his second season, had 40 catches, over 400 yards, 76% catch rate. I mean, he could catch the ball. He's a good athlete, and the arrow is pointing up. Now, we have the draft and free agency still to come, and the Jaguars are never shy about spending money in free agency. So he's got some hurdles to clear. But right now, Brenton Strange, you could see how the floodgates might open for him.
Yeah, I played Brenton Strange a bunch in DFS late in the year as like a punt on DraftKings in that 3K range, and he had some productive games. I think that's an interesting call. You know, all this Christian Kirk stuff reminds me, like when his contract first came out, when the Jaguars first signed, people like flipped out. Oh my God, how can you give Christian Kirk this much money? And you know what? He gave them some good reps. He was fine for the money, and then they can just cut him. I mean, that's why the NFL contract was such a joke. Now they're just like, all right, well, whatever. We don't want any more. He's gone. So it really didn't it really was. Don't think it was that bad of a deal for the Jaguars in the end. All right, let's go to this Jet stuff. I don't want to spend a lot of time here, man. I'm so sick of the Jets here, Jack. But of course, Aaron Rodgers is almost certainly gone. Devontae Adams is almost certainly gone as well. Allen Lazard, who was only there because Aaron Rodgers was there, is going to be gone as well. I don't even know how to get my head around the mess that is the Jets right now. What do you think this looks like going forward for the Jets, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't one where we have to guess the probability of whether these guys are going to get cut. These guys, Rodgers, Adams, and Lazard, are all going to be gone, and it's just a question of where they end up. Within the past few days, we've seen that Rodgers wants to go to the Rams and take Adams with him. We've seen him tied to the Giants. So we'll see where Rodgers and likely Adams end up. And then as for the Jets, I mean, they're just completely lacking at wide receiver outside of Garrett Wilson right now. They have Malachi Corley, who was a third-round pick last year but had a very disappointing rookie season. So they could look to add a wide receiver in the draft or free agency or both. And then we'll see what they do at quarterback too. They've got, guys like Kirk Cousins, Darnold, Russell Wilson, Fields, Jameis are all options in free agency or via a trade. They also have the 7th pick. It kind of seems like Garrett Wilson might be stuck in the same position he's been in most of his career, where he's going to get a monster target share. We know he's a very good NFL wide receiver himself, but he might struggle to overcome the poor quarterback play with the Jets. But yeah, it's right now it's just kind of a question and a waiting game to see who the Jets get at quarterback and where Rodgers and Adams end up.
It's really hard in the NFL when you go all in to win now and then you don't. And it's like, oh boy, now the Jets are in big, big trouble. That said, Daigle, they have very good fantasy assets here. Breece Hall, we have ranked 23rd overall. Garrett Wilson, we have 28 overall right now. Obviously, if they got something like Jameis or Stafford, it would be wheels up for those guys. Any thoughts on Breece and Garrett Wilson here as we approach the offseason?
The new OC that Aaron Glenn brought with him from Detroit, Tanner Engstrand, did work under Ben Johnson for his entire career with the Lions. So perhaps that does lead him to spread the ball out more, get more running backs involved beyond Breece Hall, since we did see Braylon Allen was very talented. He just also had to try and usurp Breece Hall before Hall's injury. So perhaps it is more of a committee than we expect. Otherwise, it's exactly as Jack said, with Garrett Wilson was 5th in the entire league in target share before they traded for Devontae Adams last year. Right now, he has a trajectory similar to Terry McLaurin, where the quarterback play is the really thing only holding him down from a monster season. So we'll have to see who they get under center.
Yeah, it's interesting, Evan. There's certainly some people out there that think Garrett Wilson is overrated as a player. I don't know what you think there, but yeah, any more thoughts on Jet stuff?
I don't think that he's overrated at all. I think that it just all comes down to what quarterback they acquire. As Daigle mentioned, these coaches, Aaron Glenn, Tanner Engstrand, come from the Lions. It's not like the Lions had another quarterback waiting in the wings that the Jets could go. I guess they could maybe take a run at trying to give a middle round pick for Hendon Hooker of the Lions, maybe mildly interesting. But I mean, the Jets quarterback situation is just completely up in the air, and that's going to determine so much. And we have no idea, what direction they're going to go in.
All right, let's go to this Seahawks stuff, Jack, because, Tyler Lockett hit a wall or a cliff, I would say, last year where he just completely fell off the map. Tyler Lockett will be 33 in September. Seahawks can save $17 million by letting him go. Now, Tyler Lockett has been like a hero in Seattle, like outstanding member of the community, huge part of this team for so long. I could see them maybe being like, hey, come back for $3 million and we'll let you come back or something like that. But there's no way he's coming back at his current contract. And part of that, it's not complicated. We saw Jackson Smith and Jigba just go completely nuts for much of last year. We have him up at 30th overall. We also have DK Metcalf at 46th overall. I guess my point is I'm just not that sure, Jack, if it really matters that much if Lockett is back or not, because this is going to be JSN and Metcalf's show. But what do you think happens with Tyler Lockett? And also Noah Fant is a cut candidate as well here.
Yeah, I agree with you that Lockett isn't super meaningful for the outlooks of JSN and Metcalf. John Schneider said this past Tuesday that he doesn't know if Lockett's going to return. We'll see how that conversation goes. It seems basically it seems impossible that the Seahawks bring him back at his current salary. I mean, he's also, like you said, going to be 33, and this is a guy who gives himself up whenever he gets the opportunity. I don't think there's a 0% chance that he plays, that he retires, or I think he's live to retire, basically, as well. And then, like you said, Fant, they can save $9 million by cutting him. They hired Clint Kubiak as the new offensive coordinator. Fant has really not lived up to expectations so far in Seattle or throughout his NFL career. It seems likely he's gone too. And the Seahawks look to get a new tight end. But I think neither of those guys are super meaningful for JSN, who just came off a spectacular second season and is really the alpha in this offense.
I mean, it could get real condensed here. No wide receiver 3 to speak of, no tight end really to speak of. It could get real condensed to JSN, DK Metcalf, Kenneth Walker / Charbonnet here. Daigle or Silva, anything to add here on Seahawks stuff?
At this time of the year, we should be chasing schemes, what we've seen in the past more than anything, since there's still a lot of knowledge left out there for us to gain. And the knowledge we have right now is that at least when the offensive line was healthy for New Orleans, Clint Kubiak put on a show. Yes, it came against the Panthers and Cowboys to begin the year, but 40-plus points with Derek Carr under center in both of those games, and then New Orleans trenches didn't start together from week 3 on. If Seattle can uphold or even add to their pass protection this year, Kubiak brings everything we like in fantasy: pre-snap motion, play action, misdirection. And if that's the case, then there's an outside chance that Jackson Smith and Jigba could develop further and even maybe lead the league in receiving.
I'm interested to see if anything happens with DK Metcalf, because that he has been the subject of some trade rumors. On paper, his skill set and JSN's skill set are very complementary. They should be able to work together in tandem really nicely. Geno Smith has that rapport. I assume that Geno Smith, we're confident that he's going to come back.
Yeah.
I mean, he's played pretty damn well for 3 seasons in a row now. But I think that that's maybe the one domino that could still fall is DK Metcalf if the Seahawks think they can. I don't know. The receiver market is barren in free agency. Yeah. Could they draft a guy to replace him? I think they probably ultimately end up keeping him, DK Metcalf.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to some smaller ones here. The Saints stuff. There was rumors around Derek Carr getting cut. Now, Mickey Loomis came out, I think it was yesterday or the day before, said that he wants Carr back. It sounds like there's going to do a restructure. Carr is not going to be back on his current contract, but they'll probably get him to do a restructure. Somewhat interestingly also, though, they might have to get rid of Taysom Hill's contract. Remember, Sean Payton had that crazy Taysom Hill contract. They can get out of that right now. And I do think that's notable for fantasy just because he takes red zone touches from the rest of the guys. Jack, how would you think about Carr and Taysom stuff here heading into the offseason?
Yeah, I think given the Loomis quote yesterday, we should assume Carr's back. As for Taysom, we'll see whether he gets cut. Even if he doesn't, he suffered an ACL injury and other knee damage on December 1st. He's going to be 35 years old. It doesn't seem like he's going to be a fantasy contributor in 2025, given that the Saints, as usual, need a lot of cap relief, and he has a big contract and an easy way out. I kind of lean toward him getting cut, but even if he's not, he doesn't seem like someone who's going to be super impactful this year, given the injury.
I mean, Daigle mentioned how hot this offense started before they started to get really banged up. Kamara's going to be 30 now, but he was coming off of a pretty good season. You can get Kendre Miller, hopefully more touches. Chris Olave, healthy, hopefully. Rashid Shaheed, healthy, hopefully. You can see how this offense could be fantasy viable here, Daigle. It's just, after what went down last year, it's real tough to be confident about it. Any thoughts on Saint stuff heading into the offseason?
It could have been because Kellen Moore in Philadelphia really only had 2 receivers to work with, no strong third option, but we at least saw the target tree condensed between A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. So maybe that becomes Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Shaheed, who actually out-targeted and I would say outperformed Chris Olave when they were playing together that first month of the season. So both of those players could be values because we're also losing Juwan Johnson, a touchdown machine, in free agency.
Yeah. Anything to add on the Saints? Silva, should we move on?
I just think that there could be a lot of moving parts that we don't foresee at this point in the offseason because the entire coaching staff was revamped. It does sound like Derek Carr is almost certainly coming back based on the comments from the Combine. But other than that, I feel like there's just a ton of stuff that's still up in the air that could be unsettled just because Kellen Moore's going to want his dudes in there.
Yeah. I mean, Rashid Shaheed was so good. And it really has been so good. We're 10 spots ahead of ADP in best ball right now on Rashid Shaheed at 86 overall. We're also slightly ahead on Chris Olave, a few spots at 52 overall. And I mean, God, 30-year-old running back Alvin Kamara is going 56 overall. We're at 58.
You have a 30-year-old running back. You have a receiver coming off his 5th or 4th concussion. You have another receiver who we all really like, who's coming off a year-ending injury. You know, you have an offensive line that was really banged up, was really good when they were all together, but was really banged up. And then an entirely new coaching staff. I think this could go a lot of different ways.
All right. Let's go to this Ravens thing here, Jack. You know, I've seen speculation that Ravens could move on from Mark Andrews. That would surprise me. They would save like $11 million. The cap this year is going to be $280 million. Would I spend 3.9% of my cap on Mark Andrews? Given the way he started last year, probably not. Given the way that he finished last year, definitely, right? Like, given the way Mark Andrews finished last season playing really good football, I think that bringing him back versus saving $11 million makes sense to me. What do you think the chances are that Mark Andrews ends up moving on from the Ravens this offseason, Jack?
Yeah, I'd agree with you that it's low, but not impossible. I think Isaiah Likely's breakout keeps it within the realm of possibilities. But like you said, he finished the year very well last year, besides obviously the end of that divisional round game. But yeah, I think it's possible, but I think he's probably going to be back with the Ravens next year.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this a ton last year, Silva, where it was like, can they use Andrews and Likely together? I wish they did a better job of it. We saw it a little bit, but yeah, when Andrews was out or struggling, Likely certainly proved they can be a really good pass catcher. And honestly, when they didn't have Zay Flowers, I was like, just let Isaiah Likely play wide receiver. So it may not be as much overlap as people think, but yeah, any more thoughts on the Likely Andrews situation and Ravens stuff?
Yeah, and I still think it's kind of hilarious how unserious the NFL was about giving Todd Monken a serious chance at becoming a head coach. But hey, the Ravens stand to benefit. I mean, you remember Mark Andrews had that like car crash? Was it right before training camp? He was coming off with the tightrope surgery the previous year. He got off to a horrible start, but he wound up getting back to where he was in previous years as the season progressed. And I mean, by the end of the season, you know, the playoff game notwithstanding, he was one of the best receiving tight ends in the NFL. You look at their, like, obviously they have Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely is very one-dimensional. He's awesome at what he does, but he's very one-dimensional. And then you look at the depth of their receiver core. They have Zay Flowers and then Rashad Bateman and then like nothing else after him. So I think they should definitely bring back Mark Andrews, and I think that they will.
Okay. Let's go to, you know what, Daigle? Let's go to Najee Harris. I know Najee Harris is not a cut candidate. I know he's a free agent because the Steelers did not pick up his 5th-year option. Reports out of Pittsburgh say that the Steelers are going to make no effort to re-sign Najee Harris, which obviously if they wanted to re-sign him, they would have just picked up the 5th-year option. Now, people might say, why isn't Jaylen Warren higher in our rankings given that Najee Harris is likely gone? We are at, I believe, in the 80s on Jaylen Warren right now. The thought out there, Daigle, is that Jaylen Warren can't handle a full workload. He's not a feature back. It strikes me as a lot of the stuff that people said about Chase Brown, man. And maybe y'all be wrong, and maybe no one thinks that Jaylen Warren can be a feature back. If I was a Steelers who desperately need a lot of different stuff, I wouldn't be spending a 1st or 2nd round pick at running back. A 3rd or 4th or 5th round pick, or maybe multiple running backs in the 3rd or 4th or 5th round would make more sense to me. But yeah, Daigle, where are you at on the Jaylen Warren, assuming that Najee Harris is indeed gone?
Jaylen Warren was more explosive than Najee Harris for their entire careers together. But it does bring pause that the Steelers still never trusted him at any point to use him more frequently than just a rotational timeshare back. Whereas Najee Harris in free agency, I think could end up being similar to David Montgomery because he has so many assets that a coaching staff does trust, which is why for 4 years in Pittsburgh, he never lost his starting job. So yes, Warren is still very explosive, but I still question if they'd ever use him as a full-time back.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're almost certainly going to draft someone or add someone in free agency, almost certainly. But, and like, yeah, the Najee and free agency stuff, someone's going to sign him and they're just going to be like disappointed. It's going to be, it'll be fine, but like, it'll be a big name and people will be all excited. And then he'll be like a worse version of David Montgomery, a much worse version, I think, especially if he's not on a team like the Lions. But yeah, Silva, any thoughts on Jalen Warren, Najee Harris stuff here?
I think Jalen Warren is really, really good. He's also in a certain role. He's also 5'8", 204, and he's had like a number of injury issues over the past couple of seasons. And the Steelers' offensive coordinator is Arthur Smith, and I just don't see in an Arthur Smith offense him handing Jalen Warren the keys to the backfield. So I think that they'll probably end up going and getting a rookie, maybe in the middle rounds, to pair with. Apparently, this draft is good at running back in like the middle round, like it's deep at running back. So I think that that's probably the direction that they will go. They'll go draft a guy who weighs like 225 pounds, and he'll be the leading ball carrier, and Jalen Warren will stay in that sort of satellite back role.
Yeah, and the Steelers are aware that they need more playmakers. I mean, they've been talking about it this week at the Combine. We need more playmakers. We need more playmakers. You can't just have George Pickens, whose head is in the clouds for half the season anyways. You can't just have George Pickens as your only playmaker. So I'm excited to see what the Steelers do here. Rams stuff, obviously, Cooper Kupp, they basically said, is gone at this point. Matthew Stafford continues to be like the subject of crazy rumors. Giants, Raiders seem to be the favorites now for Matthew Stafford. I don't know, Daigle. It strikes me as like they're just going a complete gutting, like a complete overhaul of a team that has been so familiar for the last few years. What do you think Rams do? No Kupp, and it looks like probably, I would say at this point, no Stafford either.
We were having a debate in the Slack on Puka Nakua's outlook without Matthew Stafford, and this assumes that Cooper Kupp is gone just because Sean McVay was maybe the only coach in the entire NFL who saw Jared Goff and said, I can't win with this guy because his weakness under pressure is far too pressing when the playoffs come around. Traded him, got Matthew Stafford, then won a championship. So it would make sense that McVay is also probably intelligent enough to move on from Stafford before like the twilight years of his career. Having said that, would someone else be an upgrade over Stafford with Puka? How do you feel about that, Silva? Where would you have Puka ranked, assuming Stafford's not under center?
Well, I think that the routes that Puka Nacua has and will continue to run are so high percentage, and the target share, his target share potential. I mean, he could lead the NFL in target share, regardless of whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Sam Darnold under center. We've seen both of those guys produce big time wide receiver one fantasy seasons from their wide receivers. Robbie Anderson had some really nice games with Sam Darnold back in the day. Justin Jefferson was the overall wide receiver 4. Jordan Addison had a ton of big games this past year. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers has done it with Devontae Adams and, a million, a long list of guys. So I really wouldn't downgrade. I mean, I do think that there is a noticeable downgrade from Matthew Stafford to those quarterbacks. But in terms of Puka Nacua, I still think like 1-2 turn is about as low as I'd have him ranked. With regard to Cooper Kupp, I was listening to Chad Graff, who covers the Patriots for The Athletic, and he says that the Patriots, their primary concern right now in terms of team building is going to be on the lines and not necessarily in the receiver core. But one receiver that I think that he thinks that would very much appeal to them would be Cooper Kupp, and not because the white slot receiver history of the Patriots, but because he could be relatively affordable and he would be a sort of security blanket for Drake May, and also a veteran in that receiver room where they had like a lot of immaturity and a really young unit last year, and Cooper Kupp would bring a level of professionalism to the wide receiver room in New England.
Yeah, I know a lot of people want T. Higgins to land in New England for Drake.
It sounds like T. Higgins isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously are going to tag him, or they tagged him already. A tag and trade would be the only way that would kind of work out. Back to the Puka thing. We have Puka 9th overall right now. His ADP is around 7th. You guys who have been listening for a while know me. I don't think there's a better quarterback in the NFL maybe for wide receiver production than Matthew Stafford. And so no matter who they get, I do think it's a downgrade for Puka Nacua and the rest of these Rams wide receivers and playmakers. I mean, Matthew Stafford is just absolutely incredible at inflating wide receiver stats. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with all of that. Last one, small one here on cut candidate is Zack Moss. Doesn't really matter. Zack Moss missed the entire second half of last season due to that scary neck injury. There's already speculation Bengals could cut him. Colts could pick him back up as Jonathan Taylor's backup. Of course, he was with the Colts previously. But my point in saying all this, Jack, is simply Chase Brown is going to be a massive asset once again here. Any more thoughts on the Zack Moss, Chase Brown stuff, Jack?
Yeah, it seems almost certain that Moss is going to be gone. Bengals writer Joe Goodberry said that it's a guarantee that they're going to cut him and save $3.3 million against the cap. So we'll see. I mean, near the end of the year, the Bengals were literally only playing Chase Brown. They give Khalil Herbert like 1 to 3 snaps per game, and Brown would play literally the entire rest of the game. That's obviously not sustainable. But we'll see. We'll see who Cincinnati adds at running back. But it definitely bodes well that they were willing to give Brown such a heavy workload near the end of 2024.
Chase Brown, final 8 games of last year, averaged 18.9 carries and 4.8 catches per game. I mean, doesn't get much better than that. All right. Let's go to some guys who are candidates for the PUP list, aka injured guys. I think valuing these guys is really, really important for anyone doing drafts now or thinking about outlooks. Jack, let's start in Houston, where Tank Dell suffered that week 16 dislocated knee, torn ACL, torn MCL, torn LCL, and meniscus damage. So I think at this point, to me at least, it would be a surprise if Tank Dell even plays in 2025. And combined with that Steph Diggs is a free agent. I don't know that they're going to be able to bring back Steph Diggs. Jack, what do you think about the state of Texans wideout core?
Yeah, I mean, landing on the PUP list for Dell would be like best case scenario. I think it's a lot more likely he goes on the season-ending IR list right away and misses all of next season. So I think for 2025 purposes, we can pretty much ignore him. Diggs is the bigger question. CJ Stroud already came out and said that he wants Diggs back, but he's also coming off an ACL. He's getting up there in age, and he's going to cost a decent amount of money. There's a lot of wide receiver needy teams with more cap space than the Texans. But the Texans do need a wide receiver. I mean, right now, besides Nico Collins, they are just completely desolate on their wide receiver depth chart. So Diggs would make a lot of sense. He should be ready somewhat early in the season.
I was going to say, I was kind of curious if he might actually be cheap because age, ACL, he has a history of kind of being a diva. You know, I was kind of wondering if maybe he could actually become, but you know, if you look at the content of the wide receiver market, maybe you know that might help him too. I don't know. Do you think that he could maybe be cheaper than anticipated?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't have much of a take on that. Diggs got surgery to repair his torn ACL on November 15th. So 9 months from there gives him a chance to be ready for week 1, but he probably has like a middling chance of going on PUP to start the year.
Yeah. So this wide receiver class, and by the way, you can check out the free agency trackers up on the site right now. Diggs, T. Higgins, who's been tagged, Keenan Allen, who's 33 years old, Amari Cooper, who like fell off the map in Buffalo, Chris Godwin, who's coming off injury, Deontay Johnson, who lost his freaking mind last year. So that's why I think that even though I agree with you, Evan, that Steph Diggs is a risk, diva, ACL, old, the class is so weak that someone's going to end up giving Steph Diggs a bag. I think the Texans kind of need him back. God, you know, you can't just walk in there with Nico Collins like they did in the playoffs.
They have to do something.
They have to do something.
I think they got to make multiple additions.
Yeah.
I think they're willing to also, given that they were willing to go out and get Diggs, even though they had Nico Collins and Tank Dell at full strength. I would imagine the priority still for this offense is building around CJ Stroud during his rookie contract. And because of that, I do want to be more bullish on this offense as opposed to the last 2 years, because now that the fraud Bobby Slovic is gone, we should not expect them to do the same shit they've always done in running the ball in early downs and then thus averaging third and 7.5 yards to go and simply asking CJ Stroud to work miracles. He could work miracles his rookie year because he's that good at professional football. He was unable to do so last year because, again, you can't put your offense in that situation, and Slowick is now not able to do that.
They also have the 25th overall pick in the draft, right? And everybody's gonna say they should take a tackle, they should take offensive lineman, offensive line. What about wide receiver? You know, like I wouldn't hate if they took wide receiver there at 25th overall. Let's go to Rashee. I don't even want to talk about this, man. I'm still so tilted, but we got to go to Rashee Rice. That fateful September day against the Chargers that ruined my best ball season, which is really all that matters. Let's be honest. Rashee Rice is chasing down that Patrick Mahomes. I'll never forget it. He's chasing down this Patrick Mahomes interception, and Mahomes just throws his back into Rice's knee, blows out his LCL, needed surgery. Now, I think, Jack, Rashee Rice should be back. And given the way for week one, I hope, and given the way that Xavier Worthy really came on late last year, you could see a pretty explosive and perfect fit here between speedster Worthy and over-the-middle yak guy in Rashee Rice. Jack, what do you think about Rashee Rice's chances of avoiding PUP and coming back for 2025 full strength?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's a lot rarer of an injury. It was not an ACL injury. ACL, Achilles, we have a lot of data on. Andy Reid said that it was the posterolateral corner, which is the PLC. He said there was some damage there. That is apparently a similar timeline to the ACL. He had surgery on October 8th. So if it's a similar timeline to the ACL, like a torn ACL, that would put him around on track to be ready for week one. I know Underdog Fantasy's Hayden Winks tweeted that he has a lot more skepticism about Rice's ability to be ready for week one. He said it's a rare knee injury and the timeline could be a little wonky there. Andy Reid said during Super Bowl media week that Rice is doing well in his recovery. So I'm kind of just in wait and see mode on Rice since it's not injury we have a bunch of data on. What makes it harder on Rice is that if he goes on PUP, misses 4 games, let's say, and then he comes back, he could still face suspension from the reckless driving stuff last summer. So, if he goes on PUP and then he gets suspended 4 to 6 games, you're talking about a guy missing first 8 to 10 weeks of the year. So, right now there's just a ton of uncertainty for when Rice is going to play. If assuming he gets suspended, maybe we'll see him week 5. If he gets suspended and goes on PUP, maybe we don't see him until November.
Yeah. We have him 50th overall right now. This is a guy who, if there were no questions about health or suspension, would be going in the second round. Like, absolutely no doubt whatsoever. Daigle, any more thoughts on the Chiefs wideout situation heading into this offseason?
It also makes a big difference for Travis Kelce's ADP because the early edge the past couple of weeks since best ball tournaments initially opened was just assuming Travis Kelce would be back. But now that we know, at least we assume he's going to be back after GM Brett Veach mentioned as much, what is Kelce's outlook now? Because we saw they didn't want to use him at all with Rice and Xavier Worthy healthy to begin the year. He was trending towards arguably the worst pick in both redraft leagues and best ball. Didn't see 15% of Patrick Mahomes' targets in any of his first 3 starts. And then only then, when Rice got injured, did he suddenly see a 15% target share in all but one of his games to close the year. So I think Rice's health also, that's going to be dependent on Kelce's usage.
Yeah, for sure. Silva, any more thoughts on Chiefs stuff? It's such a spot that people are so obsessed with to the point where people end up overdrafting guys all the time at Chiefs wide receiver.
And we know he's such a baller, and that role that they had put him in, that big slot role, was so productive. And he's got Patrick Mahomes, and he's a great tactical complement to Xavier Worthy. He's like impossible to rank because of the suspension potentiality. And I hadn't even heard of this injury. I remember when the report came out that it was a PLC, and I figured it was just, the reporter messed it up. It's a PCL. No, it's a PLC. I hadn't even heard of that. And I've been, paying close attention to football injuries for 20 years. Yeah. So I have no idea. Who knows? This one's really, really up in the air.
Speaking of up in the air, 49ers wide receiver situation is a mess. So we thought that only one of them would be back during last year's holdout. Aiyuk or Deebo. They do the long-term deal with Aiyuk. He blows out his knee. Meanwhile, Deebo has requested a trade. 49ers said they're going to honor his trade request. So we're doing these together here, Jack. Brandon Aiyuk, torn ACL and MCL in October, he's trying to get back from. And then at the same time, Deebo likely gone. Bit of a mess here in San Francisco. Wideout core. What do you think here?
Yeah, with Deebo, obviously they're going to try to trade him if they can't find a trade partner. It seems like there's going to be a pretty good chance he gets cut. Aiyuk tore his ACL and MCL on October 20th. He had surgery 3 weeks later on November 15th. The timeline for an injury like that is usually in the 9 to 11 month range, 9 to 12 months maybe. That date of the surgery is 9.5 months from week 1 of the 2025 season. Aiyuk turns 27 next month, so still in the prime of his career basically. So it basically comes down to how the recovery goes and whether he's on the shorter end of that timeline or the longer end. Kyle Shanahan said he is on track with his recovery, but noted it's still a long process. So speaking in late February, I don't really think we have a great idea of if he's going to be out there for week 1. It seems like he has a chance to be. He's kind of right in the range of could be ready for week 1, could go on PUP. So I'd say kind of a decent chance of missing the first 4 games, but we'll see how the offseason plays out with him.
Well, and they could take it easier with Aiyuk, given how well Juwan Jennings played last year. And Ricky Pearsall ended up coming on pretty well late last year too here, Daigle. So, we're at 69th overall on Aiyuk, 72nd overall on Juwan Jennings, 95th overall on Ricky Pearsall. If reports start to go worse or hesitant on Aiyuk, I could see Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall's ADP shooting up in a pretty significant way. Any more 49ers takes here, Daigle?
And Jennings already showed he can lead his entire position in scoring some weeks. So that splash play and ceiling ability, absolutely worth drafting, especially if we assume Deebo's out. My other 2 concerns are, one, shouldn't be a concern for Ricky Pearsall, I should say, because as a first-round pick and someone who did also show big playability, if we assume he's going to be in 2 wide receiver sets, this wouldn't be last year's target tree where there's 5 guys, and so he's the low man on the totem pole. It is more condensed. So it is good for Pearsall and starting sets. And then for Deebo, I just wonder where he's going to land and then how it would be used, because an uncreative coach would just line up a running back and try to use that skill set. And that is not how Shanahan has used his rushing ability at all. And so I would be concerned that the floor would just fall out entirely for Deebo in the wrong situation.
Yeah. I mean, look, Deebo's 29. He's going to be 30 at the end of next season, and he's made a living making really, truly outlier plays in terms of breaking tackles and running away from people. So we'll see how sustainable that is wherever he ends up landing. Christian Watson sustained a very late season ACL tear. This was in January. Josh Jacobs came out after the season and was like, we need a wideout. We need a wideout, which, I wouldn't take that well if I was Romeo Doubs or Jaden Reed or whatever, but I don't really disagree with Josh Jacobs. I'm not sure the Packers really disagree either. This is very late season though, Jack. So I would consider Christian Watson a pretty prime candidate to start the season on PUP. Any thoughts on him as we head into the offseason here?
Yeah, timeline-wise, Christian Watson's dad came out and said that he thinks he'll be ready around week 12 of next year. And that timeline actually makes pretty perfect sense and isn't overly optimistic. So I think week 12 is a pretty good starting point for when we should expect Watson back. But like you said, Josh Jacobs has outright said that they should get a wide receiver. Dontavian Wick's efficiency dropped off a cliff last year. It seems likely they're going to add someone. We'll see if that's someone like consequential or if that's just another rotational guy. I think Wicks is the guy who could fall from current wide receiver 3 end of depth chart further, and Dobbs and Reed maybe have some chance of being in similar roles as they were last year, but there is some risk still that they go out and get like an alpha wide receiver 1 like Josh Jacobs apparently wants and cut everyone's target share way down.
Wasn't Christian Watson's dad the guy who got into a fight with Twitter, fantasy football Twitter doctors or something like that? Or am I? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. He's my hero for that.
Guy.
Yes.
Great guy.
Yeah. Great guy. One thing about last season, Silva, which I haven't really gotten my head around yet, was Jaden Reed. I expected a year 2 leap from, and it just didn't happen. And people say, oh, well, he wasn't playing in 3 wide receiver sets. He wasn't, even when he was out there, his per route stuff was not even that good either. So yeah, I was hoping that Jayden Reed would take a leap to where he could be that alpha, because I don't really see the Packers being able to go out and find one given where they're picking in the draft, this wide receiver class, and the wide receiver free agent situation. So yeah, Silva, any more thoughts on Packers wide receiver here with Christian Watson likely out of the picture for the first couple months?
Yeah, you were disappointed in Jayden Reed. I think that the Packers were probably disappointed in Dontavian Wicks because, I mean, the ongoing consistent drumbeat from them was that they thought that Dontavian Wicks could take a big step in year 2, and he really did not, despite ample playing time. So I don't know, another situation that is very, very much in flux. You know, might they be willing to trade for a wide receiver? I definitely think that Josh Jacobs was right. I don't know. You know, he's probably going to end up having to buy all the dudes in the wide receiver room a bottle of champagne or, you know, a Hummer or something. But, you know, I think he was right. You know, I think that they need another guy for sure.
Yeah. Dale, anything to add here? We're at 73rd overall on Reed right now, 131st on Dobbs, 177th on Wicks, and we do not have Christian Watson ranked right now.
I would still just be buying what Reed showed us in his rookie year. And although Wicks could fall off the totem pole, he did just lead the organization in targets. So for whatever that's worth, he's probably still a guy you want to tack on in the last rounds of best ball.
He also still had really good separation numbers for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
This is the same drum beat I tried beating last year. So
I know.
I'm done with Wicks right now. I'm done with Wicks right now.
Yeah, we sent out a survey. Hopefully, if you're a subscriber, you got the survey and you were able to answer those questions for us. And like everything was overwhelmingly positive from the responses. We appreciate from the people, except a few people were like, Dontavian Wicks, how could you ever talk?
I feel you. Don't worry. I feel you.
God. Okay.
We lost on him too, guys.
Yeah.
We lost on him too.
Lost a lot on him.
Couple small ones here to wrap up on the PUP list. Deshaun Watson, you know, all the off-field stuff combined with now multiple. This is so weird. Like he tears his Achilles in week 7, and then he re-ruptures his Achilles while rehabbing it at the team facility in January. I don't even know how that happens, man. And, you know, now there's like...
I think he did it on purpose.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. There's conspiracies out there that he did it on purpose or not he did it on purpose. Like the Browns are like saying this so they can get out of his contract, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I don't... They have the second pick. I mean, they're being linked to quarterbacks relatively heavily. But anyways, Jack, it strikes me as pretty unlikely we're going to see Deshaun Watson ever again for the Browns. Maybe that's too drastic, but yeah, any thoughts on Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They can't cut him this year with his contract, but 2 Achilles tears in 3 months. Ian Rappaport suggested he could miss all of 2025. So I mean, he's not going to play quarterback this year for the Browns, but he also just might not be healthy enough to play quarterback at any point this year. He could go on season-ending IR and just miss the whole year.
And I don't think that we will ever see him in the NFL again.
That's certainly possible. I mean, he's been so bad even when he's been out there. I mean, getting outplayed by Deshaun Watson. And
now the double Achilles tear is going to work against his mobility. I mean, he's done. And then what kind of organization would pick him up?
Right.
You know,
and
he's done.
And like Flacco and Jameis Winston, like severely out. It's not like they played great, but they severely outplayed Deshaun Watson and moved the offense much, much better. We do have Jerry Jeudy 61st overall. David Njoku 102nd overall. And I thought Cedric Tillman gave them some good routes last year as well. He's a sleeper at 156 overall, but a lot of that was tied to Jameis Daigle. Any more thoughts on the Browns quarterback situation here? Do you think they're going to end up taking a quarterback at 2nd overall?
All the early rumors are pretty confident that it could be Cam Ward or their favorite quarterback at that number. So I would think so. And at least we saw whenever Amari Cooper was traded to Buffalo and they got a viable quarterback under center, Jerry Jeudy then went on to post career highs across the board, showing us that he can be a wide receiver 1 and utilized as such. So I'd be excited for Jerry Jeudy if the Browns get the right quarterback.
All right. Last one on my list here, Jack, is Jonathan Brooks. Obviously had that really slow rehab off the ACL tear he sustained in college. And then, unfortunately, December of last season, playing for the Panthers, he tears it again. So we have 2 ACL tears on Jonathan Brooks in the span of 13 months. We're going on like Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins type stuff here where you're an outlier, I think, if you kind of come back from this kind of stuff. I guess the difference with Jonathan Brooks is he's very, very young. He does not have a lot of mileage on his tires, but still, again, 2 ACL tears in 13 months is going to be very scary. Any more thoughts on him?
Yeah, the Panthers took it very slow with Jonathan Brooks in his rookie season. So that kind of is a possibility that they do it again. Joe Person, the Panthers beat writer for The Athletic, wrote in his Panthers mock draft that Brooks likely will miss most, if not all, of the 2025 season after his second ACL surgery. He tore his ACL in December. He didn't get surgery until the middle of January. So it seems like he's a candidate for season-ending IR instead of PUP 2. If he doesn't go on season-ending IR, it seems like he is definitely going on PUP and going to miss a good chunk of the season. Miles Sanders is basically a lock to get cut by the Panthers. So Chuba Hubbard had a big breakout last year. The Panthers trusted him as their full-time workhorse. They're going to add a running back, whether it be in free agency or the draft with Sanders. Basically a lock to be gone, and Brooks a lock to miss significant time or the entire season. So it'll be interesting to see whether they add someone who to be like in a committee or a 1B to Chuba, or if they just add a backup and roll with full Chuba once again in 2025.
Panthers also gave Chuba that extension during the season. So I feel like he's a lock to be their RB1 probably for the entirety of 2025.
I mean, this is not hindsight because we talked about it so much, but I hate to like poke the needle here on the Panthers, but perhaps we should consider, when you're rebuilding one of the worst teams in the league, not spending a high second round pick on a running back coming off an ACL
And they
tear.
traded up for him.
Call me crazy. Yeah, trading up for a running back off an ACL tear in the second round when you have holes all over your roster, like, they're going to regret that one for a while. Daigle, anything more to add on Panthers stuff here?
Herzig and I removed Brooks from our best ball rankings on the site altogether, just because the last couple of years, people have tried to get too cute with these seriously injured running backs coming back and chasing them in the later rounds for the best ball playoffs. But what we saw, including Nick Chubb last year, is that even those picks don't matter because the running backs come back way too inefficient and don't provide a ceiling worth that ADP at all.
Yep, for sure. All right. This was fun. I hope this served as a bit of a table setting for you guys to get into player movement, team rosters, for the 2025 offseason. Combine is happening as we speak. Certainly getting a bunch of news out of that. And then free agency coming in just a couple short weeks, which of course will shake up everything. And then the NFL draft. So never stops. Be sure you are subscribed here on YouTube and or anywhere podcasts are found. We'll start to be ramping up many more episodes here coming up over the next few months on these free feeds. For Jack Miller, for John Daigle, for Evan Silva, for producer Luke, for producer Ryan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.